Is your brokerage a sinking ship? Is it going under? Is it going to be here in 3 or 5 years?
Hi, we are Elizabeth and John Finley with the Finley Group, luxury brokers here in the San Diego market with agents all over the country.
So you hear it all the time, right? It matters what rooms you sit in. It also matters who's sitting in those rooms with you. So if you're a $5 million producer and you want to be a $50 million producer, it's not going to do you much good to hang out with $5 million producers. You got to hang out with people who are doing 20 million, 30 million, 50 million. You need a roadmap and some guidance to get you from here to there.
And it also matters who you align your business with.
For sure.
And choose to hang your license with. Which horse are you going to pick to get you to the finish line?
So we were very deliberate and intentional about what brokerage we aligned our business with. And one of the biggest things was that we wanted to be with a brokerage that was built for the future, not the past, right? We wanted to be with the Netflix of real estate, not the Blockbuster. And so the cool thing about what you're going to see today is Mike Delprete, who is the real estate tech strategist for Inman, breaks down the industry at a high level, but it gives you some really good insights about which brokerages are built for yesterday and which brokerages are built for the future and where you might want to align your business. So without further ado, here is Mike Delprete.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. How's it going? All right. I don't know if you've heard, the market's kind of crazy right now. So for the past couple of years, we've had this. Go to slides. Rising tide lifts all boats, right? Things have been great. Tons of transactions, tons of business, lots of venture capital in the space. Everything's been going great. But as Warren Buffett likes to say, only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked. And that's where we are right now, right? The tide is going out. So in terms of transaction volumes, we're down 18% this year in 2023. It's exactly the same as what we were up in 2021, right? The pendulum's kind of evenly swinging. So as much as we were up when the rising tide lifts all boats, this is where we're at right now. So we're moving from a situation where we have this to this. We're going from a rising tide to a receding tide. And I get super excited about both, but I'm super excited about the receding tide. You know why? Because a receding tide reveals. A receding tide reveals sustainable and unsustainable business models. It reveals real product market fit. And it reveals a company's true intentions. So that's where we are right now. That's what I'm going to talk about today. It's pretty exciting. Oh, I almost forgot. Before I came out, they gave me this to read. Oh, great news. Inman ticket prices are going up, which is awesome because that'll allow Inman to create more revenue, generate more revenue, and become more profitable. Round of applause. Why isn't anybody clapping? That's a joke, so don't hurt me when I come backstage. But that's exactly what Compass is doing. Right? In their latest quarterly results in Q1, the first number they talked about was how their commission expense was going down, right? And then in the investor presentation, the second biggest number there, right below revenue, was that same thing, the commission expense. This is what they're talking about. And that's basically saying our commission expense is going down. We are, in aggregate, paying less money out to our agents. Imagine if they kicked off their next agent event with this information. This is going out to investors, which reveals something interesting going on in the space. If we look at how much brokerages are paying out to their agents, it's really bifurcating into two camps. There's these companies up top, United, Fathom, Realty One, EXP, these low-fee, 100% commission models, right, that are paying out a much higher percentage of the revenue to agents than some of the legacy brands, Compass, Anywhere, Douglas, Elleman. There's a big difference there. And it actually correlates to market share growth. If we look at the change in transactions from 2021 to 2022, those same 5 companies grew their transaction count by 75,000. They're kind of the only ones, some of the only ones that did. Whereas the legacy brands, Compass, Anywhere, Home Services of America, lost 164,000 transactions. There's winners and losers here. And by the way, this is in a market that saw 1.1 million less transactions than the preceding year. So this got me thinking, are we at a point in real estate, like is this a Blockbuster versus Netflix moment? So I started thinking about that. And what I mean by that, when I think about what is a Blockbuster versus Netflix moment, to me, that's a situation where you have one business model that's overtaken by another. That new business model is powered by some sort of unfair advantage that's very difficult to replicate for the incumbents. And what it causes is an irreversible evolution in the way business is done. So is this a Blockbuster versus Netflix moment in real estate? I don't know, but what would that look like? What would a Blockbuster versus Netflix moment in real estate look like? So again, for me, I think it would look something like this. You'd have incumbents with flat growth. They would have high fixed costs and overhead and a limited ability to evolve to a changing landscape. And then you'd have the disruptors. And those disruptors would have a really easy to define unfair advantage, and they'd be exponentially gaining market share. So let's take a look. Let's look at some data and see. Let's start up top. Incumbents would have flat growth. So if you look at transaction volume over the past 5 years, 2017 to 2022, here's some of the biggest incumbents, the biggest legacy brands. Home Services America, Anywhere, Keller Williams, Redfin. That's flat growth, right? 1x. They have not increased. Looking at the data a different way, here's a line chart, right? You can kind of see, there's ups and downs, right? 2021, when the rising tide lifts all boats, they go up. 2022, when the tide's receding, they go down. But fundamentally, those are relatively flat lines, flat market share growth. Okay, we got that. What's next? High fixed costs, limited ability to evolve. So if we go back to Q1, look at some of the operating expenses. You see these legacy brands like Anywhere and Compass. Their operating expenses were 4 to 6 times higher than a disruptor like EXP. Hundreds of millions of dollars more. And by the way, in that quarter, EXP did more transactions than both of those companies combined. And how, limited ability to evolve and change business models, you've seen over the past year, everybody's cutting, right? Reducing expenses as quickly as possible. You can only do that to some degree, right? It reminds me of flying in an airplane and like tossing stuff out to extend the runway or something like that. You can only do so much to turn a cruise ship into a canoe, right? You can only cut so much until it just doesn't work anymore. So that's the incumbents. What about on the disruptor side? So those disruptors should have some sort of easy to define unfair advantage. Unfair advantage, competitive advantage, sustainable competitive advantage, it's all the same thing. I think it's pretty clear. Again, if we look at the cost basis, the OpEx per operating expense per transaction, disruptor EXP is 10 times lower than those legacy brands. Again, going back to Q1. We're getting more results out, Q2's out. I was looking at that last night. It's about 7 or 8x. So it's going to fluctuate, but the point is it's exponentially higher. So there's your easy to define unfair advantage, right? And that is translating into another unfair advantage, which is allowing these companies to pay out more of their revenue to agents. It's pretty easy to explain, right? Hard to duplicate, hard to replicate. And, before you come up to me in line at coffee or whatever and say, yeah, Mike, that's interesting, but these companies don't support their agents, right? They don't give them as much support. I'd challenge you to look at the data, and I would, if I had my computer on me, I'd open up this slide and say, well, what about this? If we look at the number of transactions per agent, on average, the difference between those legacy brands and the low-fee brokers last quarter was 0.05 transactions over 3 months. That's statistically insignificant. It's the same, support or not. I mean, we can have a debate about how much support there is or not. These are the results. And keep in mind, this graph on the right, the low-fee brokers, they're getting that with 10 times lower operating expenses per transaction. I don't know about you. If I was a business owner, that's probably the business model that I would want to be working with, right? So what else? Netflix versus Blockbuster moment, we would have disruptors exponentially gaining market share. Let's go back to this graph, right? We got a bunch of 1Xs, relatively flat growth for the incumbents, and then boom. Compass and EXP, 13 and 16 times growth. Exponential, I mean, that is the very definition of exponential growth over the past 5 years. And that 16x, just to put that into greater context, that's like going from a $50,000 a year job to an $800,000 a year job. It's like moving from a 600 square foot loft to a 9,600 square foot mansion. Or in EXP's case, going from 25,000 transactions in a year to just about 400,000. That's massive, massive, massive growth. Now, if we go back to that chart, if you're astute, you're probably saying, yeah, Compass. Hey, Mike, are they a disruptor? Are they an incumbent? Compass is really interesting. They have the growth of a disruptor with the business model of an incumbent. So it's hard to define this, right? And I guess if we look at the data a different way, you can see kind of that exponential growth between someone like EXP and Compass, but also the problem. Kind of up until 2021, that's when capital was easy, free, right? You can spend billions of dollars growing, which is what Compass did. But in 2022, market share went down versus EXP going up. So all of this results in this fundamental business model advantage. So if you look at profitability, adjusted EBITDA, again, it's bifurcating into these two camps. You have these companies that are profitable, brokerage businesses that are profitable, and then brokerage businesses that are very, very unprofitable. So all of that unfair advantage that they have around the business model is translating into an actual difference in results. Now, on the topic of adjusted EBITDA, you might be wondering, what the heck is that, right? That's this manufactured financial metric, but it's a metric that companies report. So if you're reading press releases or listening into investor calls or just kind of hearing about profitability, you got to be really careful what number you're looking at. So I found this chart. This helps explain it really well. That's adjusted EBITDA, that's EBITDA, and that's net income. Looks delicious. So what does that mean in practice? Well, if we go back to 2022, here's some adjusted EBITDA numbers as reported by these businesses, right? I've gone to the trouble of highlighting the unprofitable ones in red. You can see, there's profit, there's unprofit, right? That's all fine. But what does that mean when we flow it through to actually net income? Results in, collectively, with these 5 companies that I just picked, $2.5 billion in net losses. Everybody's got a net loss once you boil that down. Now, this is not to say this is good or bad, and there's one number that is the ultimate truth. These numbers all have validity, and I'm not trying to disparage anyone for reporting that. What I'm trying to do is bring a little transparency into this, so when you read something and you read about a company being profitable, I'm just saying, hey, it depends on which number it is. All right? So just keep your eyes wide open when you're looking at that and you're considering that. And by the way, only one company here had a net profit last year, 2022, EXP again. So let's go back to this, answer this question. Is this a Blockbuster versus Netflix moment in real estate? Well, I don't know. It doesn't fit the analogy perfectly. Maybe it's an iPhone BlackBerry moment. That's it. That's it. The point is, there's no answer to this. All right? There's no answer to this. The choice is, you can either obsess about the minutia of the analogy, and again, point out where it's wrong, where it's incorrect, or you could simply look at the data and acknowledge, yeah, change is happening. This is significant change. It might not be Blockbuster, Netflix, iPhone, BlackBerry, whatever, but change is absolutely happening. Now, next, I want to talk about 3 businesses. I want to talk about 3 businesses. I want to talk about a home rental marketplace. I want to talk about a mortgage company. And I want to talk about a real estate brokerage. 3 separate businesses: rentals, mortgage, brokerage. Each of them, so far this year, unprofitable. Each of them unprofitable, losing tens of millions of dollars, collectively $100 million. 3 businesses. Got a home rental marketplace, a mortgage company, and a real estate brokerage. We've got a home rental marketplace, a mortgage company. You guys getting this? These are not 3 separate businesses. This is one business, and it's called Redfin. Redfin has 3 different businesses. Each one alone is very difficult. It's very hard to do any one of these 3 things, right? They've collected together 3 of them, and the difficulty of getting 3 to work at the same time is incredibly challenging and incredibly difficult. And it calls into question kind of the idea of focus and how important focus is in general, but especially right now in this moment. With the receding tide, we're seeing more and more companies focusing on what they're really, really good at. So I'm going to use 3 puns to talk about 3 examples in the industry. The first is Opendoor. Opendoor closed the door on its mortgage operation. That was last year, right? So the company can focus. Anywhere was real sure about closing its iBuyer operation. Again, so it could focus. And then earlier this year, Zillow closing services. If you could follow me through that one. Right, again, so the company can focus. We're seeing more and more and more focus so that all of these businesses can do something I've chatted about for a while, which is compete where you can win. If you want to take one key strategy, right, it's compete where you can win, not compete where you can and compete where you feel like it, or lose as much money as possible trying to do everything, or build an end-to-end ecosystem, whatever it is. Just compete where you can win. And we're seeing more and more examples of that with this receding tide. Do you remember this skit on Saturday Night Live? The Zillow skit from Saturday Night Live last year or the year before? That was great. Really, really good. But the thing about this skit that I remember, the thing that stands out to me, and the thing that if I worked at Zillow would keep me up at night, was this part of it. You remember that? This is when the lovely RE/MAX agent kind of calls Daniel Levy in the middle of his browsing and just kind of harasses him. It's hilarious. But this perfectly illustrates a really important concept in this industry, which is the last mile problem. Now, the last mile problem comes from the world of transport and logistics, all right? And it talks about, it's just the difficulty of getting a package to a customer. So it's relatively easy to get stuff from a factory to a warehouse, right? You put it on a ship, it goes to the warehouse, done. It's relatively easy to get stuff from a warehouse to local distribution centers, right? But getting the packages from those local distribution centers to the customer, that's difficult. That's the last mile problem. And that's why we see so much innovation, like Amazon lockers, drones, pick up your packages, whatever, focused in that particular area. It's because it's really hard. So the same thing exists in real estate, right? You can generate all the online leads you want. You can throw them into your very expensive technology platform, right? You can score leads, use predictive analytics, machine learning, AI, everything right in here to figure out who's likely to sell, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, you still need to give that lead to an agent, and that agent needs to call somebody. There's no way around that. The agent needs to call the lead. They need to have a relationship with a customer. And that's why some of the biggest companies in this space are focusing on that last mile problem. That's why Zillow is focusing so much on building out their Flex program, right? They're growing out Flex, where they're working deeper with agent teams. That's why EXP and Compass, the fastest growing brokerages over the past 5 years, have invested so much time and energy into being recruiting machines. In the case of Compass, spending billions of dollars to grow agent count because they need agents. This is why, our favorite disruptor, Opendoor, has a big booth here and has just launched this big branding campaign, pivoting to be friends with agents. We got your back. We're going to serve clients. Like, we're not the enemy. We want to be your friend, right? That's a really big pivot for this business. And this is all representative of these companies trying to solve this last mile problem, realizing that they can't not work with agents. They need to work with them. So I'm sure these companies wish agents didn't exist, right? I bet they wish they could go right to the customers, work directly with them, and not have to work with real estate agents. And I'm also sure that real estate agents wish these other companies didn't exist. They could just go on, do their business, help people buy and sell, and not worry about all this other noise. But they don't. You know, everybody's kind of living together, like yin and yang, these opposite energies, magnetism, you know, like attracting and repulsing, but kind of in this system that actually works. And what we're seeing now, again, in this receding tide, is more and more companies revealing and understanding that they need to work with agents. They cannot avoid it. And by the way, if you're a real estate agent or you're involved in the business of helping people buy and sell homes, you probably don't consider yourself a problem, right? You're the solution. You're the last mile solution, right? Agents are that unavoidable, indisputable, irreplaceable central part of the transaction. So today I've given you a lot of data, and that data helps provide context. And sure, context is great, right? We want context. We want to understand why we should care, and context helps tell us the whole story. But ultimately, context also leads us to meaning. And that's really what we're about, right? That's why you're here, to try to get a better sense of meaning, to understand everything that's going on in this crazy market, parse through all the data and information, to help you figure out what your path forward is, to help navigate that. So my hope is that I've been able to bring you a little bit of meaning today. I'm Mike Delprete. This has been Pandemonium. Thank you.